I was asked to come here and talk about what happened during the year as passed from our Arctic15 win, September last year. And Antti asked me to talk about funding. So I actually sat in now on the former session, so I would be sure not to, get it all wrong from the professionals. But I thought I'll make this a little bit personal. There's so many pitches going on. There's so many, truths being shared, and it's all about traction, analytics, and metrics. So I'm not going to talk that much about Mancx, but rather, the experiences from my team and my own experiences. And I think that, the last session was quite a lot about the struggle. There were talks about the failing statistics. So this half an hour or so, I'll invite you all to the Q&A, to questions and sharing, and it doesn't have to go through me. You can shout to each other but still it's about the stages before traction. Because if you have an idea that's enough mind-boggling, enough disruptive, you can be sure it will take time. So if you have traction, the investors will come to you. But if you're pre-traction, if you need to do a pivot, if you are way ahead of the market, you will be struggling. And that's what we call the unfunded. And the unfunded is it's actually a club of two companies in Stockholm. It's Mancx, it's my company, and it's another great Swedish company called Fyndiq. We're now the funded, which is great. But for a few months we were unfunded, and it was a struggle really. And that's when you need to be really, really on top of things, because when you have the traction and you have investors calling you, life is much, much easier. So that's my idea today, to talk a little about how to work, or how we are trying to work pre-traction in terms of funding. And at the end, I suggest that let's share our best ideas from your own funding experiences. And on another note, I think, having sat in on a few sessions, that we should all try to figure out how we can use Arctic15 and Arctic Startup as a great help for us to find funding. AngelList in the US is doing a great job. They're flipping the whole investment scene. They're disrupting it. So rather than 5 or 10 years ago, you would have to go down to Sand Hill Road in Palo Alto. You have to knock the doors, ask for funding, show your slides, and now those guys are actually calling you or tracking you down on AngelList. So I think Arctic15 and Arctic Startup could play a really, really important role in this in the future. Anyone knows who said this? Everyone knows? Gandhi. So first they ignore you, then let's do this. Who's in the first phase of ignorance? Anyone? No one? Have anyone come to the laughing phase yet? Or a few laughing faces over here. And the fighting phase, are you being fought? Okay, so you're all winners. You have, you've reached the next step. I would say personally, we're probably in the fighting phase. We have our first customers. We're doing our first business. We're trying to understand, but still, we're convincing the world of the greatness of our product. But you have to remember these things, because there's going to be a struggle. But rest assured, the win will be yours. So before coming to the funding, let me give you a 2-minute breakdown on Mancx. Mancx is a Swedish company, which I co-founded with Mattias Gilott, which isn't here, no? And Mattias and I were good friends since before. And Mattias been in sales his whole life. And I've been in investing and consulting and stuff. And we've been struggling with getting good information online. So, you know, really solid, high quality information. So typically, when your boss will ask you for a report or stats or market shares, you'll end up getting 80% of that on Google, but it's just not good enough. So we were surprised to see that you can buy almost anything online, but good, solid information from your peers. So we made it our vision to help people connect online. So one person should be able to get information directly from another and pay them for the work they're doing. So the internet is flooded with free information, and we are now trying to build a premium market for information. So if you log on to Mancx.com today, you'll find a paid business Q&A, very straightforward. If you're familiar with Quora, you would probably, after a few minutes say, hey, this looks like Quora but with money. And, it's not very far from the truth. But the thing is, in order to facilitate this, if you want one person in, Brazil to sell information to a guy in the US or a woman for that sake, that's actually performing a service and enter all the taxes, income taxes, reporting, yearly tax declarations. So without having a clue about this, we started, and we ended up building a platform for trading services online. So using our platform, you can buy and sell any service and feeling secure about the counterpart paying the taxes, paying the VATs, etc. So we have a platform play for Mancx as well. And we started 2010, it's now 2 years, and we have a $2 million funding. And when I was here last year, I think we probably had a funding of short of $1 million. So we've added almost as much funds as we had before. And I'm the CEO. Mattias, my co-founder, is chief visionary people person, signing on partners. And we're a team of 10, and we're based in Stockholm. But Mattias is heading up our San Francisco office. And the reason for us being in San Francisco is twofold. One is to sell our platform to partners, and the other one being connecting with US funding. Are you with me? Yeah? So just to finish off Mancx, what we're really trying to do is to give tools to people that will help them get knowledge they thought they were out of their reach. So if someone logs on to Mancx and thinks, hey, I could actually get this piece of information from Hong Kong, cost me $30, it makes my job so much easier, then we've succeeded. So last year, we were a team of 5. This is from last year's presentation. We were fortunate to win the Arctic15, and we were a team of 5 or 6. We had just gotten our prototype going, and we've used, all the money we had left to buy a video. I brought the video to Arctic15, and I think that gave us the win. All the pictures were great, but we had a video. It was, animated with birds and stuff. So that was a great payoff, because it turns out that winning the Arctic15 was, it was a good thing for us, really. But Antti asked me to tell you a little about what the year been since then. And I think we've had sort of a typical development for many startups during the year since then. when I came here last year, we had a funding of approximately 650,000 euros. And prior to that, me and Matthias had probably paid roughly 100,000 euros ourselves. And when I sat down to look at this, it was evident, when we were, 2 years ago, I probably didn't see the faces as clearly as I do today. But we did our first funding based on a PowerPoint. Had we done it today, it would have been Prezi, but it was a PowerPoint back then. We used that funding to build a prototype with, fairly modest functionality. And when I hear people talking about, is it minimum value product, MVP, is it? Well, the first, the really slim first version of your product, I'm not all that sure that that's the way to go. I think we actually launched a bit too early because it wasn't that a great user experience, but we did it at least. We got the prototype out, and that's roughly a year ago in September. And by January, 4 months after Arctic15, we were able to secure our semi-seed Series A funding that could actually help us turn into a real company. And if you look at statistics from the US, this is what most cases look like, but possibly the figures are a little bit lower. The first being 100 to 200,000, and the second being, more. They sort of skip the prototype phase, I would say, but it all depends. It served us well. And owners in the first phase was friends and family, and in the second phase it was Swedish angels, and in the third phase we have Swedish VCs on board. So what happened when we got our funding? Well, this is the club of the unfunded. It's me to the left and the guys from Fyndiq to the right. We managed to secure our funding at the same time, and we're sharing the office space, and the whole office was, it was more pleasant to come to work, less grumpy, and everyone's doing a better job when they're funded. So that's the immediate effect of a significant funding, really. It's on a personal level. It doesn't matter what it gives. It's just so nice getting that approval for your business. But more than that, it obviously opened up a lot of opportunities for us. First of all, we had been working 1.5 years with our team, and even tech teams needs recognition. So, the team back home, they were super happy about the funding. And in the eyes of others, VC funding puts a stamp of quality on the company. So even though nothing changes, just bringing the VC money in makes you like being a real company in the eyes of others. But more importantly, new funds gave us the ability to act a little bit more balanced, so to speak, because when you are on, zero budget, you got to make so many decisions that aren't really particularly clever. But if you don't have the money, you don't have the money. So we were actually able to start planning ahead. So we had known for a long time that it would be really good for our business if we could set up an office in San Francisco. But it wasn't any idea for us to plan that unless we knew we could realize it and make it happen. And now we could. So, and for the first time in 18 months, I could do my job. I've spent so much time funding, and whether that, reveals something about our company or product, I don't know. But, if you're the golden child and if you have Twitter, you can, you don't have to spend that much money. But going back to statistics, yes, you do spend a lot of time on funding. So that's probably, for me personally, the biggest change during the year, that I have been able to work with our customers, and it's just so much fun. You know, so 2012 is totally different for me in comparison to 2011. And it made it possible for us to open up an office in San Francisco. So this is, you know, what we've been doing during 2012. We have been getting used to being able to operate more like a real company, which takes us to the next step, which is the next round of funding. It comes so much sooner than you can ever expect. And if you want to have the right owners, you know, I have Swedish VC owners. I love them, but we have a mutual agenda which includes US ownership, and that's what I'm going to talk about next. So even though we have funding, even though the Swedish owners want to invest more, I need to plan ahead and start working with the next round as soon as possible, because there's no better time to do it than when you have the money. So I've had 9 months of true work, and now I'm back funding again. Any questions? I don't think we need the mic. If anyone want to shout something, please go ahead. Yes. Yeah. The PowerPoint or the money? To build a prototype. So we hired 2 engineers. And that's an interesting fact. Neither Matthias nor me have an engineering or a coding background, and I think that makes a huge difference. And especially in the very early stage, it's much more expensive if you can't do the coding yourself. So we hired programmers, which helped us build the first prototype, and we paid, you know, like 30,000-40,000 for designing and user interaction design. So going forward from now, and this is where I hope to be able to inspire a few entrepreneurs, because I'm very, very inspired about these prospects. And I don't know if some of you listened to Nikolai Wadström yesterday. He runs Bootstrap Labs in San Francisco. He's on our advisory board. He's a great guy, and he's probably, you know, being all evangelical about the opportunities in the US. And let me say first that obviously it depends on the company, but for Mancx, it makes great sense to look at US for from a funding perspective. So I thought I'd share with you the analysis we've done to come to that conclusion. The first one being the number of investors and the market size. The kind of discussions we have here at Arctic15, you seldom or rarely don't hear them in the US, because there's much more a balanced market. So the number of investors the number of seed funds in Silicon Valley is close to 400, while in Sweden we kind of think that 2 or 3 are good. There are more around, but there aren't really, you know, they're not that competitive. And each quarter, the Silicon Valley VC investments total $6 to $7 billion, while in Sweden they accumulate to 65 million. And I put a smiley because I don't believe that. It says so in the stats, but you know, possibly if we count Spotify and Johan's investments in Spotify, and that's probably 80% of that. But otherwise, I can't see how, you know, close to 500 million Swedish kronor are poured into startups in Sweden each quarter. I don't think that. But still, the difference is huge. And in terms of investor characteristics, the typical value investor is connected, has experience from running startups, and they're used to making money from their seed investments. So the average seed investor or angel investor in the Valley makes on average a 30% return on their investments, while in Sweden the general perception is that you probably lose more money than you make. And listening to the guys before me, it makes sense because they need to have large portfolios. They expect 5 to fail and make money from 1 out of 10. So if I'm an angel investor, I would also expect 9 to 10 investments to fail. While in the US, they are used to make a lot of money. Which leads us to the investor preferences. They're used to make good business, so they are really keen on buying into great potential. And that's typically what I'm selling with Mancx. I'm selling a huge potential. I'm selling the global information market. I can't really tell them how we're going to get there, but I'm confident we will. And they kind of like it. While in Sweden, it's all about cash flow. So even though they will tell you that, it's not about monetizing, we just want to see traction. That's not true. It's very rare, I would say. Most of them want to see cash flow. And that has to do with the fact that as an early stage investor, they need to get their returns. And they're not able to do that in Sweden unless they have a cash flow. While in the US, if you don't have cash flow, you can still make a great investment. And then we've looked at market entry support. Can any investor help us into new customers that we want? And at Mancx, we have the platform play, as I said. So we want to enter big communities in the US, coder communities, LinkedIn, Facebook, all these that you can meet over coffee in San Francisco, but it's just impossible to get it here in Sweden, well, here in Finland. So investors in the Valley can help us get into customers, and that's things I could spend a year doing from Sweden, really. And then I'm down to perhaps the most important point, and that's the engagement and access to investors. There's every week in San Francisco, I can meet 10 investors, while in the Nordic area, there are only 10 investors. And if they don't pick up the phone, it's like having the greatest product, but there's only 2 customers out there, and they have the product already. So from a sales perspective, it's totally frustrating selling investments in Sweden because you know everybody from day one. So that's my most important point in this presentation. As for competition, yes, there's competition, but from what we've seen spending a year in San Francisco, the Nordic startups are awesome in comparison. Everyone here running a startup should be proud, and we see so much crap in terms of investment cases in Stockholm. And at the bottom of this list says company specifics, coming back to my point that obviously this could be very different from company to company, but being in consumer internet, it makes sense for us. So this all comes down to finding the right owners. And I haven't paid enough attention to this, I think. I'm very happy with the owners we have, but that's more out of coincidence, really. Because from stats, we know that it takes 2 to 3 times longer than you expect. You probably need to pivot once or twice before you succeed. And if you have the right mentors, you're likely to raise so much more money than other companies. So if you don't have owners that can do this for you, can help you do this for you, it's not the right owners. So summing up, as if you'd asked me for advice, I will give you advice. And this is just as much as a reminder to myself as any advice. But I think we have sort of reasoned on Mancx as we're the golden child, that the stats doesn't apply to us. but they do. So you gotta face this and plan ahead as if you are to pivot, as if it's gonna take 2 to 3 times longer, and get you the owners that can manage that. I think you should try to decide really early on whether you need local or international funding, because international funding takes a while. It does take a while to raise funds in San Francisco. And finishing off, our best friends during our whole funding process, that's been other startups. Because every startup meet up with different investors, different customers, so this is where Arctic15 comes into play, I think. And I'll ask Antti and the others to really make sure that we can connect properly rather than having to collect the business cards. Because every one of us has a wealth of knowledge about the funding process. And I'm happy to share everything I know about funding and investors, and I hope others are too. That's my speech today. Any comments? Questions?
Any questions? Let's wake up, and any questions?
I have to do a Steve Ballmer on you if you don't.
Yeah, exactly. Which one? The developers one or?
I couldn't tell.
I had a question for you.
Fire away.
When you said the PowerPoint, you got the investment with the PowerPoint, is that correct? I mean, how do you really do that nowadays? Everybody's talking about prototypes and that you need a big, huge prototype, and unless you have some traction or something, you just can't do it. How could you find an investor or people to do it?
Look at me. I can sell anything. You know, the hair and everything. No, but I think...
Defense rests.
I don't think we could have sold it to a professional investor, but we sold it to family and friends. And we really started with a market analysis. So that's, we basically sold, do you want to look into this opportunity? This appears to be a great market to be in. But I had to, call in some favors. But it's 2 years ago.
Sold your soul to the devil then?
Well, to my friends.
I have a question about a startup company who already has some global reach and thinking of maybe going to the Bay Area. What's your short advice to do that? Should we or what should we do first?
First of all, stats are clear. You should go there if it's suitable for the company. In our case, Matthias, my co-founder, moved because it was also part of his dream to go there. Less part of my dream, personally, because it's another way of life. And then, without promoting Nikolai too much, because there are quite a few connectors around, but it makes great sense to actually affiliate yourself with some kind of startup environment. And in our case, the rocket space, which is a hub for startups. Otherwise, it's easy to, it's extremely networked in San Francisco. It's easy to get in if you know people, but you can just as easily pass it. So I think it'll take a year to get connected. So my advice is get connected, but it should probably be part of your personal agenda because it's a huge effort.
All right, any more questions?
So first of all, great presentation.
Thanks.
I thought it was amazing. My name is Daniel Downing, Mobile Living. I was just wondering, you mentioned that you were getting a lot of, you were going through the experience with a lot of friends and other startups. What's the sort of one thing you picked up from the other startups that you just went, oh, I wish I'd done that?
Well, not so much in terms of how we've sold the investment case as we have been sharing insights on investors. Mm-hmm. So we've compared our target lists with all our startup friends, and that saved us a lot of time. And it sort of levels the playing field a bit. You get to know more about the investors and what they want. And we have blacklists. And so that's mainly the interaction we've had, because it takes so much time to prepare your pitches and do your presentations. So it would be surprising if someone could do it better. But I think, as they said in the prior session, that would we've done it today, it's probably more about the product than the the facts and figures. I've spent lots of time on the charts and stuff, and I probably would have spent less if I could.
Okay.
All right. Any more questions? There's one at the back there to the right.
Thanks for the presentation. How do you feel about splitting the team to 2 locations? Because you're raising the big round, basically trying to get there. At the same time, you're obviously building results and everything. So how does that work from team dynamics point of view? Because just asking this, I've done it myself.
Yeah.
And know that it's not always the easiest thing to do.
No, it's awful.
Thank you.
And more importantly, because Matthias is such a nice guy. So the team loves him. And then he moved to San Francisco. And to San Francisco, we have the 9-hour time difference. And being a metrics guy, I like to think it's great because we work daytime in Sweden and nighttime in the US, and we can do everything twice as fast. But actually, we're doing it half as fast because if you lose the feedback loop one day, it will take 2 days to get the feedback. So now we've added a senior product manager in San Francisco because it's just not viable. You got to have some kind of critical mass on the other side. So we're doing pretty well in Sweden in the Swedish team. It's very tech oriented, but for the marketing side and working with daily metrics, it could be utterly frustrating. So it's a price we're paying right now, being a small team in 2 places, but we feel it's necessary. So. Sort of, the balanced view on it. It's great, but difficult.
All right, I think we can take one more question before the break. So if there is one question in the audience. Anyone?
I have a question for you.
Yeah, please.
Will you build AngelList in the Nordic area?
Perhaps. That's definitely a good thing. We are thinking about different monetization ways, so the AngelList could be a good start. We'll see. Thank you very much for the presentation. I think it was really good. Again, they were our winner last year. I hope you enjoyed the ride, and that we're thankful that you're here today as well.
It's a pleasure.